The city of Petra was known to its original inhabitants as Rakhmu. The Nabateans, a group of nomadic Arabs who were the first to call the location home, settled the area around 400 BCE. The Nabateans were uniquely adept at maximizing the output of the mountainous desert environment around them. This put Petra in an ideal location along the Eurasian spice trade routes, generating vast wealth for its inhabitants. Nestled between the Gulf of Aqaba and the Dead Sea, Petra was built in and around the Jabal al-Madba mountain, accessed primarily through an almost mile-long gorge called the Sik. The first sight one would meet upon entry was the Al-Khazneh, or the Treasury, built sometime in the 1st century CE. It is not entirely clear why this magnificent structure was built, but some claim that it was a mausoleum for King Aretas IV. Due to the construction of buildings into the colored rock face, the settlement is known by some as the Red Rose City. After the city was conquered by the Romans in 106 CE, they renamed it Arabia Peretrea. The emergence of sea trade routes gradually diminished the volume of commerce passing through Petra, and the native population began to move elsewhere. Although dams were constructed to make more efficient use of the floodwater, and the Byzantines erected several churches, the city ultimately crumbled after the Galilee earthquakes of 363 convinced the remaining population to leave. In 2007, Petra was named as one of the new 7 wonders of the world. The Jordani government has taken advantage of the lack of tourists during the COVID-19 pandemic to carry out extensive excavations and reconstruction projects. The story of Carthage is one of blood and gold. The epic poem The Aeneid tells the story of Dido, circa the 8th century BCE, who fled her family's kingdom after discovering her brother Pygmalion's responsibility in the death of her husband. Arriving in the land of Berber king Larbas, she was granted as much land as she could cover with oxhide. Cutting it into small, thin strips, she surrounded the base of a hill on the eastern side of the Lake of Tunis. As more and more followers settled around her, Queen Dido and the city of Carthage rose, eventually forming the capital of the famous Carthaginian Empire. The location of Carthage in North Africa made it a key junction for Mediterranean trade, becoming one of the world's richest cities of the classical period between 700 BCE and 500 CE. The fall of Carthage began during the Third Punic War in 146, after the Romans, led by Scipio Aemilianus, leveled the city in the Siege of Carthage, rebuilding the rubble only partially and renaming it Roman Carthage. It is estimated that 50,000 Carthaginians were enslaved after the battle. The city was again sacked and destroyed in 698 by the Umayyad Empire at the Battle of Carthage. The ruined city was used as a fort by the Islamic Empire until the 8th Crusade in 1270, when all of its residents were massacred and the city's remaining defenses were destroyed to prevent future occupiers from using it. Today, Carthage has been preserved as a suburb on the outskirts of Tunisia's capital Tunis, with many Tunisians living close by the ancient ruins. For years, a nomadic group of Mexica people roamed the southern portion of North America, hopeful that they would find the subjects of an ancient prophecy, which said that they would build an illustrious city at the spot where an eagle held a snake in its mouth perched upon a cactus. In 1335, this prophecy came true when they spotted the foretold eagle on a swampy island of Lake Texcoco in the Valley of Mexico. At this spot, the Mexica people, later named Aztecs by a German geographer, would establish the city of Tenochtitlan, which would be one of the world's largest cities at its peak. The Aztecs were able to thrive in their swampy environment by building a series of dams used to filter fresh water to the necessary areas while keeping brackish water out. Throughout the lake, they also constructed chinampas, nicknamed floating islands by many historians. The chinampas were artificial islands surrounded by the lake's shallow waters used for farming. The farmers would travel between the chinampas using tiny boats called trajineras. On the 8th of November, 1519, Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés met Emperor Moctezuma II in Tenochtitlan for the first time. By this time, Tenochtitlan was one of the most populous cities in the entire world, roughly 5 times the size of London. Bernal Diaz del Castillo wrote upon entering the city for the first time, "Some of our soldiers even asked whether the things that we saw were not a dream. I do not know how to describe it, seeing things as we did that have never been heard of or seen before, not even dreamed about." Moctezuma welcomed the Spaniards with open arms, but the European explorers remained extremely suspicious so far from home. Shortly after, 2 officers were killed on a diplomatic mission to a neighboring tribe. Cortés ordered his men to besiege Tenochtitlan, causing a famine which would weaken the native population enough for the Spaniards to claim the city. As the remaining Aztecs were ravaged by disease, the Spanish destroyed many of the city's symbolic sites, smothering the embers of the Aztec Empire. Upon the ashes of El Templo Mayor, the city's most important religious structure, the Spanish colonial city was founded. Today, the last remnants of Tenochtitlan can be found in Mexico City's Xochimilco district, where some of the chinampas are still maintained to preserve the nation's history as a World Heritage Site. The image of the eagle and snake upon a cactus is immortalized in the flag of Mexico. Little is known about the city of Kilwa Kisiwani prior to the arrival of the King of Shiraz, Ali bin al-Hassan, who received the island as a gift in the 11th century. It is believed that he then had a son with the daughter of the island's native king, and that this son would set the pieces in motion to build Kilwa Kisiwani into the capital city of the Kilwa Sultanate, which dominated the Swahili coast well into the 16th century. By the 1200s, many of the city's wattle and daub buildings were being replaced by stone structures afforded by strong trade relations with the Arabian Peninsula, India, and China. Kilwa grew rich by exporting its abundant spices, tortoiseshell, coconut oil, ivory, and gold. So much trade occurred within its borders that the government minted its own coins for domestic trade from the 13th to 15th centuries. In a 1331 expedition to the island by famed Arabian explorer Ibn Battuta, he wrote of the immense generosity of Kilwa's Sultan, Al-Hassan ibn Suleiman. He also wrote of the city's great mosque, constructed of coral stone, the largest structure of its kind ever to exist. The Sultan lived in Husuni Kubwa, a large fort built in the 14th century, where vast amounts of Chinese Celadon pottery have been found by archaeologists. In the early 16th century, the Portuguese began extorting tribute from the city. Soon after, General Francisco de Almeida besieged Kilwa, taking control and displacing much of the native population. The Portuguese abandoned the city in 1512, leaving it free to come under the control of an Arab mercenary, before being retaken by the rulers of Zanzibar in 1784. Unfortunately, the last of Kilwa Kisiwani's population fled circa 1840. The island was briefly a part of the German East Africa from 1886 to 1918. Those wishing to visit the ruins of the once great city can easily obtain a permit from the Tanzanian government and access the island via a brief dhow boat ride. A lack of funds to maintain the ruins led to Kilwa Kisiwani being placed on UNESCO's list of World Heritage Sites in danger in 2004. Those who would like to donate can send help to the World Monuments Fund, which has been organizing preservation projects since 2008. While archaeological finds in the city of Palmyra date back to the Neolithic period, documents first mention the city itself in the 2000s BCE. The city began its rapid ascendancy after aligning with the Roman Empire in the 1st century CE. Renowned for its trade caravans and commercial colonies, the city amassed substantial wealth as a key stop along the Silk Road. Fueled by their immense wealth, the Palmyrines undertook many extravagant architectural projects, which are still praised today for their unique fusion of Eastern and Western styles. One of these projects, the Temple of Bel, was constructed to honor the Mesopotamian god of the same name. Palmyra met its commercial and military peak around the year 260 when its king Odenatus defeated Persian Emperor Shapur I. Fueled by their recent victories, the king's successor, Queen Zenobia, rebelled against Rome, establishing the short-lived Palmyrene Empire. In response to the betrayal, Roman Emperor Aurelian destroyed the city in 273 before it was only partially rebuilt by Diocletian some years later. The Palmyrene and Greek-speaking residents were converted to Christianity in the 300s and then finally Islam in the 600s after being defeated by the Rashidun Caliphate, who also installed Arabic as the lingua franca. Following an attack by the Timurids in the 1400s, the former metropolis was reduced to only a small settlement. The diminished Palmyra continued on until its final days in 1932, when the French removed its natives to a nearby city so they could conduct excavations after World War I. That's all for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel or our social media accounts listed below. Please also consider donating to any of the preservation programs discussed for the cities. See you next time on Missed History.